afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure for me introducing this dialogue with Lebanon Minister of Foreign Affairs, Abdallah Habib. With me, correct, till now. With me is Professor Zaid Ayadat, Director at the Jordanian Center for Strategic Studies. Welcome.
Thank you.
We cannot conceal that for Lebanon is not an easy moment, even in its long and traveled history. I personally cannot forget, as I mentioned before, the scene at the aftermath of the blast when I went there to cover for RAI what happened at the 4th of August 2020. The political and institutional landscape is a little bit complex, and we will see in a moment why. And there is a complicated, deep economic crisis, but there are also positive challenges, and I'd like to mention the recent historical maritime border agreement with Israel signed with the pivotal role of the United States. So let's start from here, from the political stalemate, the political situation. Professor Ayadat, I give you the honor to start.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the honor to start, and I'm delighted to be here and the presence of Your Excellency. And yes, I think we're talking just a few minutes ago about Lebanon and how Lebanon is beloved by everyone, and it has this special status in the hearts and minds of the Arabs. And yet, when we see this kind of institutional crisis, if you wish, and governance dysfunctionality, people start to wonder, as they are wondering loudly, maybe the decision-making process is kidnapped, is controlled, is taken by certain power in Lebanon that will decide on the outcomes of the process. So this landscape, this dysfunctionality, this lack of institutional mechanisms, how that is impacting the stability of society first and then the state, and how that's impacting the livelihood of people and their everyday life. I want to go deeper into this after I see your opening statements, because we have thousands, millions of questions about what's happening in Lebanon. So, if you don't mind, please.
Thank you. Lebanon is one democratic country in the Middle East that is suffering like any other democratic country in the Middle East, that where we have uncontrolled elections. And I heard in the session before that, even before, is that Israel is stable. Israel have had 5 elections in the last 3 years and still does not have a cabinet until now. They will have one. But there are 2 others in the Middle East, this Lebanon and Iraq. The issue is that there is no control, no one-party majority in this, in the results of the elections. We've had elections last May. The result was kind of stalemate, is that nobody has, no faction, no party, and no group of parties, like it happens, like it is in Italy. A group of parties get together, form a cabinet. Well, nobody has the majority to elect a president, because in the president, according to our constitution, we need 2/3 of the number of parliamentarians. 2/3 of 128 is 86. Nobody has control of 86, and they're still maneuvering there. That's why we have a political problem that would follow is also forming a cabinet. Usually it takes some time to form a cabinet so that we can have like stable government in order to rule. And this cabinet that I belong to now has been in 15 months. Maybe, only 9 or 10 months, only 3 or 4 months was functional, meeting, taking decision. The rest was either caretaker, like we've been since May 21st, a caretaker government. And before that, we had some political problems. It stopped for 3 or 4 months. So, well, this is the price you pay for democracy, that you don't have one person that calls the shots in the country, that you don't have authoritarian regime. You have really, every time I myself, if I want to take a decision on, let's say, they were talking about Ukraine, and we took a strong decision on Ukraine, and it's one of the most, the strongest one in the Middle East, including Israel and Turkey and everywhere else. We condemn the Russian use of power, of military power against Ukraine to solve problems that should be solved through negotiations, even if they take time. Because in these days, no problem has been solved with military interventions. And no other country condemned it. But to take this decision, it's not like the foreign ministry would take, you have to make a lot of consultation with a lot of parties in order to take this decision. This is a pluralist society, and it produced a pluralist, multi-party, more than Italy, parliament. So it's very difficult, but we insist on having our democracy, even if it is limping now, even if it is not working now very well.
I'm sorry, Lucia, if I just can follow very quickly on this,
Sure.
and then leave the rest.
Please go on.
I mean, Your Excellency, I totally understand. So the constitutional structural arrangements of power and power sharing in Lebanon is very well known, is written and been the debate for decades now, since the Taif. And a lot of different parties and power in Lebanon wanted to revise that power sharing formula, as also you mentioned Iraq with that. And we know how that might be very dysfunctional, even at the expense of democracy itself. So if this to you is normal and it's a normal outcome of a democratic process, don't you think still it is the extra constitutional arrangements and the veto power that is held by some power in Lebanon that actually practicing more pressure on the system than the constitutional arrangements itself?
No and yes.
Okay.
If you're talking about Hezbollah, I think.
I do.
Yeah. Hezbollah is a very one strong party in Lebanon, but it cannot enforce or impose its decisions on the others. They are strong, no doubt about that. They have allies. They know better than anybody else how to form alliance with other parties. They have alliance with the other Shiite party, which is the Amal, and they have alliance with the Christian party, which is the Free Patriotic Movement. So they formed an alliance, a strong alliance, and then they have other alliances as well. While the others, you see them fragmented. But it doesn't mean that it dictates its position on the others. They many times differ with, for example, Mr. Bassil, former Minister Bassil, many times on that. And sometimes he wins, sometimes he loses, sometimes they differ. Like on selecting the Prime Minister, the Free Democratic Party did not vote for Mr. Mikati, who is now the Prime Minister, while Hezbollah and Amal, they voted for him. So, there are differences. They are strong, but they do not, I think they are from those who would call for change in the Constitution, because what we have now is not the Taif as is. It came out of the Taif to stop the war. Even Lakhdar Ibrahimi, who was the main person in the Taif, he is an former Algerian foreign minister who was in the Arab League helping the Lebanese in that time in 1989. He said this agreement was to stop the war. That was in '89. Up until now, we didn't change anything. And that's why it is, and we need to change it. The Taif calls for decentralization, for example, calls for many other things that we really are not implementing. We need to implement fully the Taif and then judge the Taif accordingly.
Thank you.
Minister, you said this is the price of democracy, but this price has been paid mainly by common people in Lebanon. Let's talk about the economic situation. The World Bank has described it as one of the worst in the world since the 150 years. We have assisted to some really unique events. The bank depositors locked out of their savings, and people, common people, desperate people, making robberies. There is a loan promised by the International Monetary Fund, but again, we need reforms to get it. Can you elaborate?
Yes. Well, first, I mean, those depositors who go to the bank, it's not robbery. They're claiming their money, and they think then they're getting it. They're getting some of it. You know, this is not robbery. The robbery was done, maybe done, if there is a robbery, it's done by the banks, not by the depositors. Depositors are the victims of what happened in 2019. So we have a problem. I mean, we made this, again, the government I belong to had an agreement with the IMF. It's more important, the reforms that we agreed upon, that are more important than the money they are giving us. Because Lebanon is a small country, it can generate money. And it has people outside that they send a lot of money to the country. We have 1 million people between Europe, Africa, and the Gulf that really send a lot of money. Their families, they belong to Lebanon. It's not like the Lebanese in Brazil or United States or Australia that they became migrants. Here, no, they still belong to Lebanon. Their families in Lebanon and their extended families in Lebanon, they send money. This summer, for a small country like Lebanon, I think this summer we had something like $5 billion came to the country. What's the problem? It doesn't go to the banking sector, and therefore does not make the circle, the economic circle that's required to. Therefore, it doesn't go to the central bank because the Lebanese don't have confidence in the banks. And now our agreement with the IMF is not yet ratified by the parliament. Why? Because there is opposition. Because the law allows opposition to take place. The law allows lobbying. I mean, the banking sector is lobbying against it. The merchant sector are lobbying against the IMF agreement. That's why we are at a standstill. We are not able to, the parliament is not able to move in the direction that the government took in agreement with the IMF. Yes, we have a very strong economic, very big economic problem that we're facing in addition to the political problem that we are facing. But we have also major problem, which is the presence of 2 million Syrians in Lebanon. Mm-hmm. They are called refugees. We call them displaced Syrians. They call them political refugees. There is no way on earth that 2 million can be political refugees.
The bigger per capita number in Middle East.
In the whole world. And they are economic refugees. They ran away from war, which now there is no, I mean, there is no peace, but there is no war, no fighting in Syria, except from time to time with the borders where the Turkish
let's see. Who knows? In the near future, I mean, border between Turkey and Syria will be, I think, in trouble very soon, but
no, I mean, the Americans are on the eastern part of Syria, and the Turks are on the northern part, you know, so anyway, otherwise, in Syria itself, there are no problems. I mean, there are 17 million people under the regime. I'm not defending the regime. We had problems with the regime during the war, Every community in Lebanon had problems with this regime. But this is not the issue. We've got to live together in this area. Like in Europe, France and Germany had wars and wars and wars, and now they are big allies. So I mean, this is the case also with us Syrians. That's why when somebody talk about forced return, no, there would be no forced return in Lebanon for the Syrians. We will not do that because the Syrians are our neighbors and we have to be careful. They are there because they are receiving money from donors, from UNHCR and WFP. They are receiving money and they're receiving also food subsidies. So this presence there is a threat to the structure of Lebanon. We all recall, all Lebanese from all communities, what Pope John Paul II said in 1997, that Lebanon is a message. What did he mean by that? He meant that in this world, you know, friction when what do you call it, the clashes of civilization, what do you call it? Yeah. They talked about Islam and Christianity. They didn't talk about Islam and Buddhism or Christianity and Hinduism. They talk about Islam and Christianity. And there is friction there. In Western countries or in Christian countries, Muslims don't feel equal to the rest of the population. And in Islamic country, Christians don't feel the same. Only in Lebanon, in this globe, only in Lebanon, they feel equal to each other. This is the message that John Paul II was talking about. And if it fails in Lebanon, God knows what's going to happen to this relation, to this friction between Islam and Christianity all over the world. And this presence of 2 million Syrians on a 4 million Lebanese now is the danger, the real danger on the existence of Lebanon and not on the economy only. And they are also, they also consume, like we have subsidized bread, they consume 40% of the subsidized bread. And the infrastructure, whether it is schools or electricity or water or sewerage or roads, they are consumers of these, while this infrastructure is not enough, is not good enough for the Lebanese themselves. And it's worse, and we are getting no subsidy on this from any country or any donor in this world. The donors are focusing, I don't know why, the reason why, they're focusing on the Syrians to keep them in Lebanon. And this is what the main danger on the existence of Lebanon.
Your Excellency, let's just spice it up. I'm not convinced with your argument on the refugees. And I think you have harsh views. And Lebanon is not the only country that has refugees. I know this is hard. I come from Jordan. We have almost 2 million Syrians in Jordan.
That's right.
But these comments are not made by any Jordanian officials or government. And the idea is that they're there because they're benefiting. You know, the suffering of the refugees should be actually something directing all of our consciousness as a human being. Talking about human dignity, His Highness the Prince was talking about it this earlier today. So what I'm saying, Lebanon as a country, as a state, has its own obligation to receive and protect and save these refugees like all other countries. We know the suffering, the pressure on resources, natural resources, the lack of natural resources in Lebanon and Jordan. We all suffer from that. But to say or to depict it that people want the Syrians to stay and the Syrians are staying because benefiting, and they do that everywhere in the world. It's not only in Lebanon.
Look, Jordan has 2 million as well. Most of them are on the borders. Some of them sneaked into the country to the cities.
Opposite. It's the opposite. 2/3 of them living in the cities and less than 1/3 living in campuses.
Good. You want them. They don't change the geography. They don't change the demography.
We have
Fine.
to keep an eye on the time because we have a lot of questions still.
But let me finish this.
Okay.
I talked with the Jordanians, all the Jordanian officials. Yes, they are receiving a lot of aid. They think that, you know, these are imposed on them until the solution is done. And they don't affect the ruling. You have a king, you have a government, you have everything, not like us in Lebanon. Then the Palestinians have been waiting for a political solutions for 74 years, and it's yet to come. These people are waiting now for 11 years, and who knows? I talked with the EU officials, asked them, is there a roadmap? Do you know when is this going to finish? They don't have an idea. All what they care about, the regime in Syria. Okay, why should we pay for it? Why should we accept 2 million while Europe, if anybody comes illegally to Europe, they throw him out, right? They send him to Rwanda or they send him somewhere else, or some of them, there were Lebanese in Denmark saying.
I have to ask you to interrupt because
Okay,
we have few minutes left and we have a lot of questions.
go ahead.
For you, let's start from the maritime boundaries agreement. It's a very important one.
Look, this is a win-win agreement. It was negotiated by the Americans. And we, at the end, we reached an agreement that the Americans were writing and they were communicating with both sides. And we didn't sit down with the Israelis. At the end, what happened, the Americans presented to us the agreement. The president wrote them, in Lebanon, wrote them a paragraph saying that we agree to this agreement. And then the foreign ministry wrote a letter or a covering letter sending it to the United Nations, and we gave it to the United Nations at Nakura. And I think somebody is here that received this agreement. The Israelis did the same. So without any direct negotiations, we were able to reach an agreement because it's a win-win agreement for both of us, for Israel and for Lebanon. And I don't think the Netanyahu forthcoming government would do anything to it because Israel benefits as much, more than Lebanon from this agreement.
Would that, Your Excellency, constitute a base for future shape of a relation with Israel, like getting indirect negotiations with them?
No.
This was green-lighted by Hezbollah, which means that Iran is on board as well and is in approval of that. Wouldn't that constitute the base for future relation?
Our main problem with Israel is the Palestinians. The 2002 Arab proposal is that give the Palestinians their state and all Arabs would recognize Israel. Lebanon is in this category and stays in this category. I mean, the Palestinians need a state. 74 years they're waiting for a state and they didn't get it. And the whole world, I mean, I think the Western world is practicing double standard. Look what's happening in Ukraine and look what's happening in historic Palestine. We need one standard for everybody in order to move in the right direction in this world, have peace. I think, I'm from those who think that there would be no security, no stability in the Middle East until a solution is found for the Palestinians acceptable to them and justice to them.
Okay. You mentioned the United States. What is the status of the relation with the United States in a wider frame? Not forgetting what is going on with Iran, the crisis of the Iranian nuclear agreement, the quick enriching of uranium by the Tehran leadership, and the impact that an escalation can have on Lebanon.
Yes.
Given the influence that, not from now, Tehran has on the country.
You know, we have excellent relations with the United States. In fact, the United States is supporting, the largest supporter for the Lebanese armed forces, and or what we call LAF. Okay, LAF is very important for the country. It's the backbone of Lebanon. If LAF collapses, the country would collapse. And therefore, the United States knows that and is supporting, and there are many European countries are supporting also LAF. And so is Qatar also is in this category of supporters. We differ sometimes from the United States. We supported the Western vote in the United Nations for Russia's military interference in Ukraine. Every vote in this direction, we are supporting it. But we are against and politicizing the UN organizations. That is to kick Russia out of this organization. We are against that. And this is a recommendation was taken by Arab foreign ministers meeting in Cairo. It so happened that Lebanon was presiding over that meeting. And it's not binding to all Arabs, but I think we move along with it all the time. So we don't vote for Russia out. We don't want the League of Nations again, like what happened in the 30s and end of the 30s. I think, if you want dialogue to solve the Ukraine problem or another problem by dialogue, then everybody should be in and contributing. Iran. It's a very delicate situation. We most of the time we abstain in the United Nations. Last time we rejected the condemnation of Iran on human rights. Of course, the United States was not happy, but this was a sovereign decision that we have taken. So we agree sometimes with the United States, sometimes we disagree, and they're not happy, but it doesn't mean that the relations is gone.
Well, Your Excellency, I can't but agree with you about the double standards practiced by European and some other states, especially when it comes to refugees and others. And also, the way they're dealing with refugees. I think at some point we all suffered from this containment mentality that governed most of Western countries when it comes to Syrian refugees. And you're right, one person illegally arrived to any shore, it is a problem, while Jordan and Lebanon and Turkey and other countries have to deal with 6, 7, 8 millions of Syrian refugees. And, when it comes to the relation with Israel, actually you sounded more Catholic than the Pope, so you are not going to do any kind of negotiations or relation with Israel unless there is a solution to the Palestinian based on the Arab initiative that I think, time and history has passed it now, and we're in total different strategic outlook. And I don't know how that's gonna work, especially if I want to bring this to my last question to you is about your relation with the Gulf countries and the new arrangements that already taken place in the region, including the Abrahamic Accord, but your relation with Saudi Arabia, with most of the Gulf countries, but mainly with Saudi Arabia, has really suffered for the last few years. And I'm not sure if you're back to the right track where Saudis are main player in Lebanon's politics.
Which one should I take first?
Well, up to you.
Yes, we are stuck to the 2002. I know that since then, a couple of Gulf countries recognized Israel. They have a diplomatic relations with Israel, but we are still there. I think most of the Arab countries are still there. Saudi Arabia is still there. And the North Africa, Algeria and Tunisia are still there. So there are some of us who are still there. We want to back the Palestinians to get their own state in the West Bank and Gaza. And if they are satisfied, we are not going to involve in negotiation. If they are satisfied, we have no problem. And this was a Saudi initiative in 2002. King Abdallah did it, etc. Now, the other one is regarding...
that where we agree with the double standards. So I ask you about the Gulf, your relation with the Gulf.
Well, yes, we suffered at one time our relations with the Gulf, but now we are to normal relations with every Gulf country, including Saudi Arabia. They have an ambassador in Lebanon, and we have an ambassador in Riyadh, and their ambassador is very, very, very active in Lebanon, and we have no problem even sometimes if the protocol is broken. We want Saudis to be in Lebanon.
Is this a complaint against this activity?
No, it's not a complaint. It's not a complaint at all. I said, I receive sometimes questions, yes, fine. We want Saudis to be in Lebanon in their own conditions. Now, as for assistance, the only country in the Gulf that is really now helping Lebanon, especially the Lebanese army, is Qatar. Yes, we are not receiving any assistance, humanitarian assistance. There is a lot from all the Gulf countries, but it is not direct to the government.
I'd love to have asked you more and more questions. That time is over. So thank Minister Habib for this frank and open dialogue discussion. Thank Professor.
Thank you, Lucia.
Eyeda.
Thank you very much. I
Thank you.
enjoyed it. Thank you. That was good. That was good.
Thank you very much. Rome starts again tomorrow at 9. Thank you.